Let's go to Google and type MySql Workbench download. Click the download link. Let's scroll down and click go to download page. Then click the first one. Click no thanks, just start my download. And now let's open the set installer that we downloaded. Let's click custom and then click next. Let's bring down the MySql server and click the latest one, bring it over. Let's click the application and click MySql Workbench, bring it down, and we click the latest version. Then click next, and just click yes. Click execute. Let's wait for it to install. Once it's done installing, click next, and click next again. Just click next, and we will set our password for our root account. Let's click next, and press execute. Let's click finish, next, and then finish. And we could start our MySql Workbench. Let's click on our local instance, and we put in the password that we set for our root account. And we're into the interface. So before we begin, I'd just like to say I deleted the server that came installed with the MySql Workbench installation because I already have xamp. If you don't have xamp, it's okay. You can still use the server that came with MySql Workbench. If you're using xamp, make sure you start Apache and MySql in your xamp control panel. So let's go ahead. So this is where we write our queries, and this is the list of our databases. So first we're gonna start off with the how to create a database query. So we type in create database, and then we give our database a name. And let's call our database our database. And to execute everything in this window, we press here. But if we want to execute certain lines, we need to highlight and then press this lightning icon. And here you see our query was successful, but we don't see it here. But if we click this refresh button, you can see our database has been created. Now, to perform queries in our database, we need to type in the use database syntax. And to do this, we type use, and we type in the name of our database, which is our database. Let's select this so only this query gets executed. And then you see our database is selected. Now to delete a database, we simply use the drop database syntax. So we type drop database, and then we type our database name that we want to delete. So like this. could see our database was deleted. Now that we know how to create, use, and drop a database, now let's create a table in our database. So let me just delete this and just execute this. So we created our database. So now that's done, let's create a table. And to create a table, we use the create table syntax. So we type create table, then we write our table names. And then I want to call our table names pet owners. After that, we open some brackets. And in between those brackets, we first write the columns that we want. And the first column that we want in our table is the owner ID column. And next, we have to declare a data type for our column. And in the owner's ID, it's only going to be numbers. So we're going to use the integer data type. And since this is the first column and it's an integer, we want to add some constraints to it. And the first constraint we'll add is the not null, which means the columns can't have empty values. So we write not null. And then the last constraint that we use on this column is the auto increment, which means every entry into the tables, this column would be auto incremented by 1. So let's type auto underscore increment, and it's already here. Now that we set our column, the data type for our column, and our constraints, we write a comma, and then we move on to the next column. So the next second column, we're gonna call it name, and we're gonna give that a data type of varchar. And varchar means various characters. And then we're gonna set the length of our various character data type to 20. And then we also wanna add a not null constraint to it. And we put our comma, and the next column would be gender with a data type of various characters with a length of 20. We're not going to have any constraints on this column. And the next column is age, and that's going to be an integer, and an integer is a number. Then we're going to have our column named occupation. That's going to be various characters. Let's give it a length of 30. And then our next line, we have to set the primary key. And the primary key is the unique identifier for all the data in our table. So to set the primary key, after we created all our columns, so we type primary key, and in between brackets, we type in the name of the column which we want to set as our primary key. So we want to set the owner ID column as our primary key. And just copy and paste. And then we have to add a semicolon after our bracket. Let's highlight this and execute it. And you can see our table was created. Let's go in our databases. Let's refresh. And you see our table pet owners. And you can see the lists of our columns. Now to delete a table, we use the drop table syntax. But before we do that, I'm gonna cut this and paste this later. So to delete a table, we use the drop table, and then we write the name of the table we want to delete. So pet owners. And you can see our table was deleted. Let's create our table again. Refresh this and you can see we get our table back. To delete a column in our table, we use the alter table drop column syntax. So first we write alter table, then we write our table name, pet owners, then we type in the drop column syntax, and then we give the column name that we want to drop. So let's drop occupation. Let's refresh our database and table, and you can see our column was deleted. The occupation column was deleted. To add a column, we use the alter table add syntax. So we type alter table, and we want to alter our pet owners. Then we add the occupation column, and then we write our data type, which is various characters with a length of 20. Let's only highlight this because we only want to highlight this selected query. Execute. Let's refresh. And you can see we got our occupation column back. Let's say we want to modify the data type in one of our columns. We will use the alter table, and then we want to alter our pet owners. Next, we type in our modify column keywords. Then let's modify our age column. And then we change the data type to various characters. Let's only select the query we want to execute. Let's refresh. You can see there's age and it's an integer. And now it's changed to a various characters. Let's change it back to an integer. And here you have it. Let's say you want to add a column after a specific column. So let's say we want to add a column after our name column. We're going to start with our alter table, the name of the table we want to alter. Then we're going to add, and then we're going to add the column name, and we're going to call it, let's say, let's add the address. And then we have to add the data type, which is, we're going to use the various characters data type, give it a string length of 20. And then we're going to write the keyword after. And then we said we want it after our name column. So I'm calling our name column, and then add our semicolon. Let's select the query we want to execute. Let's refresh. And you can see the address is added after the column that we wanted it to. So let's drop that column. And we're gonna drop the one we just made, the address. Let's execute, refresh, and now that is gone. Now let's move on to inserting data into our table. To insert records into our table, we use the insert into statement. So let's type insert into. Then we type the name of our table, which is pet owners. And then if we're inserting data into all the columns, we don't need to specify each of the columns. So first I'm gonna insert data into all the columns, and then after I'll give an example inserting data into 1, 2, or 3 columns. So we use the insert into pet owners, then we use the value keywords, and then we add our data in between brackets. So in the first column is the owner's ID, which we will give 1. And when we're inserting integers, there's no need to put double quotes around it. The second column is the name, and it's a string, so we need to put double quotes around it. And the first name is Alex. Then we separate it and go to our next column, which is gender, and he's a male, comma. Age is an integer, so we don't need to put a string around it. And then his occupation is a lawnmower. Let's execute this. And we have an error. So we have to use the keyword use, our underscore database. Now let's execute everything. And you see our row got inserted. I'm gonna copy more rows into here. I'm gonna have this available for you to download, so you can copy and paste it into MySql Workbench so we can practice queries. And it's giving a mistake here because each row has to be separated with a comma. So let's execute. Okay, it won't let us insert this again because we already have this data entry. So let's delete this and then execute. And then you see all our rows has been inserted. So now let's move on to the select query. Before we move on to the select query, let's see how we can insert data into specific columns. So let's type insert into pet owners, and then we just want to add the owner ID and the name. So owner ID column and our name column. Then we write our values keyword, and let's insert data in only the owner ID column and the name column. So the owner ID is an integer, so there's no need for double quotes. And then the name we're gonna add is Brad. Let's execute, and it's been inserted. Now to view all the data that we put into our table, we use the select query. So we say select, and to select all the columns in our table, we use the star symbol. Next, we have to use the from keyword and our table name. Let's press execute. And you see we have all our data that we entered in. Remember, we only added Brad's owner ID and his name. And when a column doesn't have a value, it's called null. So now let's move on to the where. And the where clause is used to filter records. So let's say I want to select all the records where the gender is a female. We would use our where clause. Then we call our column name gender equals, and in quotes we put female. Let's execute. Oh, we need to remove this semicolon. So let's press execute. And you can see it returns all the females in our table. Let's do another example. Let's select all from pet owners where age is less than 30. Now let's execute. And you see it brings everyone whose age is less than 30. Now let's move on to the and, not, and or operator. And let's start off with the and. And the and operator displays a record if all the conditions separated by and are true. So let's just change here. And let's select all from our table pet owners where occupation equals student, and let's say gender equals female. And it will display these records if the conditions separated by and are true. So let's press execute. And you see we have two females and their occupations are student. Now let's move on to the or operator. And the or operator displays a record if any of the conditions separated by or is true. So let's change this and into or. And gender into, let's do occupation. And the occupation will be programmer. Let's execute. And it displays if any of the conditions are true. So we'll get all our programmers and students. And the not operator displays a record if the condition is not true. So the way how we write this is we write where not. And let's say we don't want to get the females from our table. So we would write where not gender equals female. Let's execute this. And you see all the people in our table that's not a female. Now let's move on to order by. And the order by keyword is used to sort the result sets in ascending or descending order. The order by sets the records in ascending order by default. To sort in descending order, we use the DSC keyword. So let's do an example. Let's say we want to select the name and the age column and we want to order it by age in descending order. So we select our name column, age column, from our table name, which is pet owners. And then we use the order by keyword. Order by age in descending order. Let's execute this. And you see it brings us our age in descending order. Let's remove descending just to show that it's in ascending by default. And you can see it brings it in ascending order. Or we can use the ASC and it will give us the same result. Now let's move on to testing for null values. And a field with null values is a field with no value. We use the isNull to test for null values. So let's look for null values in our table. So let's select all from pet owners, all the columns from pet owners. And we're gonna say where age is null. Let's execute that. And you could see it brings us our values where the age is null. Now let's move on to the update statement. And the update statement is used to modify the existing records in a table. So we do this by writing update. Then we call our table name. And then we use the set keyword. And we want to set gender to male, where the name equals Brad. Let's execute this. Okay, if you're getting this error too, you just go to edit, preferences, go to SQL editor, and uncheck save updates. Press OK. And then you need to restart your MySql workbench. So let's do that. Let's stop the servers. Start it again. Workbench. Let's run this query. And you can see we filled in the gender column with male. Now let's move on to the delete statement. And the delete statement, it's used to delete existing records in a table. So to do this, we type delete from our table called pet owners, where name equals, and we're gonna delete Brad. Let's press execute, and you see that it was successful. Let's select all from pet owners. Execute, and you see Brad is deleted. Now let's move on to the limit clause, and the limit clause is used to specify the number of records to return. So let's say we only want to select 3 people whose ages is above 25. So let's select our column name and the column age from our pet owners, where age is more than 25. And then we use the limit keyword, and then we said we want the top 3. And here it returns only 3 people in our table who's older than 25. Now let's move on to the min and max functions. And the min functions return the smallest value, and the max function returns the largest value. So we do this by selecting min, and we want to select the minimum age in our table. Age from pet owners. Let's execute, and you see the minimum age is 6. To bring the maximum age, we use the max function, and then let's execute, and you see the max age is 62. Now let's move on to the count function. The count function returns the number of rows that matches a specified criteria. So let's say we want to select the amount of programmers in our table. So we'll use the select count and use all from our table called pet owners, and then we said we want the programmers, so we call our occupation column where occupation equals, and in between quotes, programmer. And you could see the number of programmers in our table is 3. Let's do another example. And we want to select the number of pet owners whose age is less than 25. So we just simply change this where age is less than 25. And let's execute, and we see we get 9. Now let's move on to the average function. And the average function returns the average value of a numeric column. So all we have to do here is call our average function. And we want the average age from our pet owners table. And let's say where gender equals female. Let's execute. And you see the average age of the females in our table is 31.1. Let's check the average age of students. So where our occupation column equals student. Let's execute. And you see the average age of our students. It's 15. Now let's move on to the sum function. And the sum function returns the total sum of a numeric column. So let's just change this. Call our sum function of our numeric column age. And you can see the sum of our age. The sum of our student's age is 60. Now let's move on to the like operator. The like operator is used in a where clause to search for a specified pattern in a column. There are 2 wildcards when used in conjunction to the like operator. And the wildcards are the percentage sign, and this represents 0, 1 or multiple characters, and then we have the underscore, which only represents 1 single character. So let's say we wanted to get the pet owners whose name starts with C. We'll type select all from pet owners where our name column, and then we call our like keyword, and then we put a C and then our wildcard. And this is gonna bring up everyone whose name starts with C in our table. And you can see we have Caroline, Curtis, and Chris. We can also say we want to find out the names in our column that ends with S. we would put our wildcard in front of the letter S. Let's press go. And you see there's Curtis, Chris, and Thomas. Let's say if we want a name that begins with C and ends with S, we press go, and you see we get Curtis and Chris. Now let's say we want to find out the people who's in their 30s in our pet owners table. So we would have the select all from pet owners, where age, like, and in between quotes, we put 3 and an underscore because the underscore represents one character. Let's press go. And we get everyone in our table that's in their 30s. Now let's move on to the in operator. And the in operator allows you to specify multiple values in a where clause. It's a shorthand for multiple or conditions. So let's say I want to select different occupations in our table, like students, programmer, and writer. So I will say select all from pet owners, where occupation, and then we use our in keyword, and in between brackets we put the occupation that we want to bring up. So we said we want to bring up student, comma, programmer, comma, and then writer. Let's press execute, and you see it only brings up what we specified. Now let's move on to the between operator. And the between operator selects values within a given range. So let's say we want to select individuals in our table whose age is between 40 and 60. So let's select all the columns from our table, which is named pet owners, where the age is between, we use our between keyword, and we said 40 and 60. Let's press execute, and you see it brings up everyone that's between 40 and 60. Now let's move on to aliases. And aliases are often used to make column names more readable or to change the name of a column. So let's say we want to select our name column. Select name, and we want to call it owners. And then we have to write from which table we're talking about, from our pet owners table. Let's press execute, and you see instead of name, it brought up owners. Let's do another example. Let's say I want to find out the total owners in our table, and I want to name the column total owners. So I would use the count, use our as for the alias, and we said total owners from our table pet owners. Let's execute. And you see here we get our total owners table. Instead of giving us count, it gave us the name of the total owners and our total. Now let's move on to the group by statement. And the group by statement groups rows that have the same values into summary rows. So let's say we want to find out the number of males and females in our table. So let's select our gender column, count, from our table pet owners, and then we want to group by gender. So we use our group by keywords, gender. Let's execute. And you see in our table, we have 11 females, 11 males, and 2 people decided to tell us to mind our business. Let's say we want to select the gender count of individuals whose age is more than 30. And we also want to order it in descending order. So all we have to do, we'll add in where our age is more than 30, and we want to group by gender and order by, let's add an alias here. So instead of bringing up count, we want to bring up as amount. And then when we're doing aliases and we change the name, if we want to order it by the count, we have to use the amount. So we order it by the amount in descending order. So let's press execute to see if this all works. And you see we get the gender and the amount in descending order, whose ages are more than 30. Now before we move on to joins, let's add a pet table to our database. So this will be available for you to download in the description. And basically we're creating a table named pets. We have the pet ID as a column. It's an integer. We set it to not null and auto increment. We have the pet name column, class column, age column, family column, and then we have the owner's ID column. And we're gonna make the foreign key means we're gonna link this owner's ID to our pets table. So the foreign key will reference the primary key in the pets table. And after the reference, we put the column that the foreign key is linked to in our pet owners table. And on delete set nulls means if data is deleted in our primary table, which is pet owners, and it's linked to our pets table, then the values will be set to null. And then we have our primary key for our pets table, and we let the pet ID be our primary key in our pets table. So let's execute this. And let's refresh, and you could see our pets table was created. Let's get this data again. It will be available for you to download. The link in the description. Delete this. Control V to paste, and let's execute. So now we can practice join queries. And a join clause, also called inner join, is used to combine rows from 2 or more tables based on a related column. So in our pet owners table, we have our owner ID as the primary key. And in the pets table, we have the foreign key, which is owner ID, and it's linked to the owner's ID in the pets owners table. So what the inner join does, or the join keyword does, it selects all rows from both tables as long as there is a match between the columns. So to start a join, we have to type select pet owners, and the pet owners is our table. Then we have to put a period and put a column in our pet owners table. So we'll choose the name column. We'll also choose the occupation column. So first we have to write pet owners table dot occupation. Then we're gonna call some columns in our pets table. So pets dot, and our column is pet name, pets, and we're gonna get the class column. Next we have to say what table we're taking it from. So we're taking it from pet owners. And then we use our join keyword to join the pet table. So we're gonna join our pets table. And then we need to write out where these two table links. So we do this by typing the on keyword. And we call our pet owners table. And the column, the primary key is the owner's ID. And we're gonna set that equal to the pets table, and the foreign key is the owner ID. So let's press execute. And you see it brings up all our columns as long as there's tables that's linked together. Let's do another example. So I just want to take all the columns from pet owners and pets. So we do this with our star and the star. Let's press execute. And you see it brings up all the columns in our table. Now let's talk about the right join. And the right join returns all the keywords from the right table and the matching records, if any, from the left table. So in order to do join, we just put right join over here. And we're gonna be joining the pets table. So the pets table is the right table, and the left table is orders. So let's execute. So the right join brings up all the records from the right table, and it only brings the matching records from the left table. We're not gonna have any null values because all our pets table has a match to the owners table. Now let's do a left join to see what that does. And the left join returns all the keywords from the left table, which is pet owners, and the matching records, if any, from the right table, which is pets. So let's execute this. And let's see why this isn't working. Oh, there was a space before the comma. So it brings up all the columns in the left table, which is pet owners. So let's scroll down and we see we have null here. We have null is because the left join returns all the records from the left table, which is pet owners, and the matching records, if there's any, in the pets table. So here you can see we have some individuals in our pet owners table who don't have a pet. Now let's move on to SQL unions. And the union operator is used to combine the result set of two or more select statements. So the way how we do this, let's select name, age from pet owners. Then we use our union keyword, and then we're gonna select pet name and age from our pets table. So in the unions, the pet name and the name from our pet owners and the pet name must have similar data types, and our select statement should have the same number of columns. So let's execute. And you see first we have our pet owners. And if we scroll down, we will get to our pet's name. Like now we're in the pet's name. Buffy, Pixie, Scooter, Smoke, and so on. Now let's move on to the create table-like statement. And to create an empty table based on the definitions of another table, we use the create table-like statement. So we do this. Let's create table, and we're gonna call our table house owners. And all we have to do is write our like keyword and pet owners. Let's execute this. Oh, there's no comma here. That's my mistake. So let's execute. And you see this was executed. Let's refresh this. And we have our house owners. Let's say we want to copy the data from the pet owners and put it in the house owners. We would use the insert into keywords. So we type insert into house owners. And then the next line, we're gonna select all from pet owners. Oh, this is our mistake. Let's execute. And we have an error. Oh, let me select this and then execute. And you see our query was successful. Let's select all from house owners. Let's execute this. And you see our house owners is the same as our pet owners table.